if I can see a way that some of the revenue that would be saved by using a better, faster, cheaper solution could accrue to, I've talked a lot about this lately in that, none of us really know whether he has that power through executive order to establish any sort of strategic reserve of any asset. So it appears, and again, I'm not an expert on this, but it appears that it has to come through Congress.
Okay.
There are specific bills in front of different groups, one led by Senator Lummis and another led by, I can't remember the name of the senator, that are moving toward trying to create this strategic Bitcoin reserve.
Yeah.
Now, those are specific to Bitcoin. They have nothing to do with any other tokens. There's been talk about Trump making US-based crypto. Now
Right.
we're talking cryptocurrencies, not Bitcoin. Bitcoin is a cryptocurrency, but let's differentiate. Cryptocurrencies that are US-based make gains on those tax-free. And of course, all the Hedera and the XRP and the Cardano people were, oh, that's going to be great. And it could be great, but why would he do an executive order like that? Why would he, and again, I don't even know if that's in his purview, but why would he push for that regulation? Well, if he and his family have suddenly started to acquire crypto assets, it's logical, maybe not ethical or moral, but it's logical that then he would be in support of making those things more profitable. Is it true that the Cardano crowd, the XRP crowd, leadership, meaning the people who own most of those tokens, have been lobbying really hard on Washington, not just Trump, but the previous administration,
Oh, yeah.
to get favorable positions? The XRP people want the banking system to use it as a base layer, like to replace SWIFT. Is there a world where you could see enough, lobbying being done that gets proposed by? Sure, I could see that. I don't like it personally because I don't think it's decentralized. I don't think it's the right answer. To me, Bitcoin is the base layer, and then we build everything on top of that is a better solution. But again, long-winded way of saying,
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of things happening. I think very little will be done by executive order. It has to go through the proper channels, but that doesn't stop the speculation. Historically, we as a firm have favored the larger, more established protocols. We own a lot of Bitcoin. We own a little tiny bit of Ethereum. We own a fair amount of Solana, although we sold most of that historically. We don't own XRP. We don't own Cardano. We don't own Hedera. That doesn't have any information content other than the fact that when we talk to founding groups, we have not met very many founding groups that are working on those platforms. If suddenly somebody were to say, yes, XRP is going to replace SWIFT and Bank of America is going to use it and JP Morgan is going to use it, if, and that's capital I, capital F, if I can see a way that some of the revenue that would be saved by using a better, faster, cheaper solution could accrue to token holders, then I want to own that.
Yeah,
the problem with most of these utility tokens, as you know, Paul, is they don't get any of the cash flows, right? The whole ICO was all about speculation without equity ownership, a claim on cash flows or debt. I'm an old-fashioned investment guy. I like to own cash flows. I like to own things that accrue value. If we have other token networks that become usable on a global scale, and somehow the cash flow accrues to token holders. So there's no question that any change in the rules, whether it's accounting rules, which would allow banks to hold these assets that under current accounting laws, if a bank owns this asset, it hurts their capital base. And that's true of risk assets. That's why they don't do a lot of private investments or venture capital, because there are accounting rules that, mark-to-market rules that, so if they change those rules or make certain assets acceptable as depository investments like cash or other, then clearly that would change the supply and demand. If we are trading an asset, if banks are simply trading, that is really no different than Coinbase or Kraken or Gemini trading, right? It's just a transaction business and you're taking a spread. So would profit be made? Sure. And would the value of a bank go up if they could, arb the spread on crypto? Sure. One of the challenges of all of this is who's going to make the rules, who's going to decide which of these proposals we follow. Mm-hmm. Is it going to be like the bad old days where he or she who pays the most to lobbyists gets what they want, versus, hey, let's evaluate all the technologies. Let's look at the world like a business. And so if we actually did that with evaluating the technology of Web3 and blockchains, and we integrated that into the financial services system rather than a pay to play,
right?
Bravo. That would be